I don't remember the exact moment I began to feel like I was somehow in the way. It wasn't sudden. It was more like fog rolling in at dusk, soft at first, easy to dismiss. But then it stayed, settled, lingered. And before I knew it, I had started apologizing for my existence in the smallest ways. For asking a question, for taking too long to walk across the room, for forgetting the name of that actor I used to love. Have you ever caught yourself saying, "Sorry for being a bother," when you're simply living? This wasn't always who I was. I remember a time when people depended on me, when my hands were strong, my mind quick, and my place in the world undeniable. I raised children, I worked long hours, I fixed sinks, baked birthday cakes, stayed up through fevers. There was no question that I mattered, but something shifted after I retired. At first it was a relief, freedom, time, silence. Then came the quiet I hadn't prepared for. The long stretches of days without a phone call, the sense that my opinions had become optional. One afternoon I was visiting my daughter and her family. I offered to help with dinner, but she smiled politely and said, "Just relax, Dad, we've got it." I sat on the couch watching them buzz around the kitchen, and for a moment I felt like a guest in a life I had once helped create. Have you felt that too? Like a bystander in your own family? I don't think my daughter meant any harm. In fact, I know she loves me. But there's a kind of subtle erosion that happens, not in big, cruel gestures, but in the gentle accumulation of being left out, overlooked, passed by. And if we're not careful, we start to believe the lie that aging equals diminishing. But that's the lie, isn't it? Because if we pause just for a moment and turn inward, we remember. We remember that our worth was never in our productivity. It was never in our speed or our sharpness or how many things we could juggle in a day. Our value, our dignity, it has always been within us, intact, quiet, enduring. The Stoics spoke of this often. They didn't measure a person by youth or strength, but by the clarity of their inner life. They taught that what is truly good cannot be taken away, not by time, not by illness, not even by death. Virtue, wisdom, courage, these remain. And yet, in a world obsessed with doing, how often do we forget the sacredness of simply being? Maybe today you woke up and thought, what's the point? Maybe you looked in the mirror and saw the lines, the wear, the slow decline. But let me ask you something. When did beauty become the enemy of age? When did stillness start meaning insignificance? We are not burdens. We are bearers of memory, of insight, of hard-earned gentleness. We have survived loves and losses, wars and births, regrets and renewals. We have loved people through their hardest days. We have lost people we thought we couldn't live without. And yet here we are, still breathing, still learning, still holding space for the ones who rush past. So I invite you, yes, you, to sit with me a while. Let's talk not just about getting older, but about growing deeper. Let's ask the questions no one else dares to ask anymore. Let's tell the stories that don't make the news but shape the soul. Let's remember the quiet power of a life well lived, not for applause but for love. And maybe together we'll begin to believe again that we are not burdens. We are blessings in motion. I didn't notice it right away. It crept in quietly like dust settling on a bookshelf, imperceptible at first, barely enough to bother you. But then one day I realized I had been living with it. This quiet, aching thought. Maybe I'm in the way now. It's strange, isn't it? How a life full of meaning and motion can, over time, begin to feel like a footnote, There was no dramatic moment, no sudden shift, just small things. A glance that passed through me instead of landing. A conversation that continued as if I hadn't spoken. A favor turned down not out of malice, but because someone assumed I'd rather sit and rest. And I began to say sorry more than I should have. Sorry for asking. Sorry I forgot. Sorry I'm moving slow today. Have you done that too? Apologize for being human? It wasn't always this way. There was a time when I felt rooted, when my presence held weight in a room. I was needed then, called upon often. My hands were busy, my phone rang, my name carried purpose. I fixed things, I carried groceries. I remembered appointments for other people, not just myself. I made coffee in the morning not only for me, but for a table full of others. But lately I've been making one cup. I remember a moment not long ago, maybe a year or two. I was with my grandson, helping him with a school project. At least, that's what I thought I was doing. He had asked me to sit with him while he worked, and I offered a few suggestions. He didn't respond at first. Then he looked up and smiled politely and said, "It's okay, Grandpa. I've got it." He didn't mean anything by it. Not really. But something in me winced. That little voice, the one I thought I'd silenced, whispered, "See? You're not helpful anymore." That voice, that insidious, cruel voice, it doesn't shout, it whispers. It mimics your own tone. It sounds like you. And after a while, it becomes easy to believe that it's the truth. But it isn't. Still, the feeling lingers, doesn't it? The sense that the world has moved on to faster, louder, younger things. That your time, your usefulness, has expired like milk in the fridge. And now you're only around because no one has bothered to throw you out. It sounds harsh, I know. But these thoughts come to many of us, whether we admit them or not. And in the quiet hours, when the phone hasn't rung and the chair beside you stays empty, they grow. There are days I look in the mirror and feel like a guest in my own body. The lines around my eyes weren't there before. The softness in my jaw, the curve in my shoulders, the way I move a little more carefully than I used to. These are new companions. I don't resent them, not really. But they remind me that time is passing, whether I'm ready or not. And with time comes this uncomfortable question. Am I still needed? I wonder if you've asked that question too. Sometimes it's not even about being needed. It's about being seen, truly seen. Not as someone to be managed or helped or visited out of duty, but as someone who still holds depth, complexity, stories worth telling. There are days I miss being interrupted by a request, a crisis, a knock at the door. I miss the rhythm of chaos, the way the world once demanded my attention and gave me purpose in return. Now the demands have quieted. The world, it seems, is doing just fine without my instructions, and yet, I'm still here. That fact alone should mean something, shouldn't it? There's a certain kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being invisible while surrounded by people. You can be in a room full of laughter and still feel like no one hears you. You can smile at a family dinner and still feel like your voice is echoing into a void. It's not that they don't care. I know they do. My children love me. My friends, what few remain, check in when they can. But love doesn't always look like presence. Sometimes it looks like distance. And distance, no matter how well intended, has a way of widening the cracks in your self-worth. I've learned that the hardest thing to say isn't "I'm lonely." It's "I don't feel like I matter anymore." But here's the thing, and maybe you need to hear this today. You still matter. Your value has never been about how many tasks you complete or how many people rely on you. It's not about your job title or your usefulness or how fast you can walk across a room. You matter because you are you, still breathing, still trying, still carrying a lifetime of wisdom behind those quiet eyes. The world may have forgotten how to see that, but that doesn't make it any less true. The first time I told someone I felt like a burden, I was met with immediate denial. "Oh no," they said, "you're not a burden." But their eyes betrayed something else. Discomfort, pity, maybe even relief that I'd said it so they didn't have to. That moment taught me something. People don't know how to hold this conversation. They'd rather reassure us than sit with us. They'd rather fix the silence than face the sadness. But you and I, we know better. We've lived long enough to know that some truths can't be swept away with cheerful words. So let's not sweep this one away. Let's look it in the eye. Let's say what few are willing to say. Sometimes we feel like we don't belong anymore, and that hurts. But that is not the end of the story. It doesn't have to be. There was a time when the days felt impossibly full. From the moment I opened my eyes, I belonged to the rhythm of someone else's needs. Someone needed breakfast. Someone needed to get to school. Someone needed their uniform ironed, their homework checked, their fever cooled. Someone needed me, and I love that. I didn't always say it out loud. I was too tired most days to articulate how meaningful it was. But looking back now, I can see that it was in those very demands, those moments of being pulled in 5 directions at once, that I felt most alive. There was no question about why I was here or what I was supposed to be doing. The answer was always right in front of me. Have you had those years too, when you were the one everyone leaned on? The one who knew where things were, how to fix what was broken, who remembered birthdays and allergies and when to water the plants? I think most of us who are older now lived a chapter like that. And maybe like me, you didn't realize just how sacred it was until it had already passed. I remember driving my children to school in the mornings, those sleepy conversations in the car, the music low on the radio, the backpacks bouncing in the back seat. I remember kissing foreheads that didn't want to be kissed and packing lunches with little notes tucked inside, even when no one acknowledged them. I remember late nights spent stitching costumes for school plays or waiting up for someone who missed curfew, the worry mixing with quiet pride. There was always something that needed doing, and somehow I always found the strength to do it. Do you remember that version of yourself? The one who said yes even when tired? The one who gave not for thanks, but because that's what love looks like in practice? We don't talk enough about how valuable that time was, not in the currency of career or money, but in something more permanent, in legacy, in the invisible bonds you forged through years of showing up. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't make headlines, but it mattered. And now in these quieter years, I find myself looking back, not to live in the past, but to remind myself, I have lived with meaning. I remember teaching my youngest to ride a bike. He was afraid, terrified really, but I held the seat steady, jogged behind him, whispered, "You're doing great," again and again until he stopped wobbling. And even when he finally took off on his own, he still looked back to make sure I was there. I was, and I always was. Now he's a man with children of his own. He doesn't need me to steady the bike anymore. But some part of me wonders, would he still look back if I whispered just once more, "You're doing great"? There's a kind of ache that comes not from pain, but from tenderness. From remembering the roles we once played, the helper, the teacher, the anchor, and realizing how far we've drifted from those identities. But here's what I'm learning. Just because those roles have changed doesn't mean their value has disappeared. I don't have to be the center of the storm anymore. I can be the calm that surrounds it. There's a kind of quiet dignity in that, don't you think? Some days I catch myself smiling at small things. A perfectly brewed cup of tea, a bird landing just outside the window, a memory that arrives like an old friend. And in those moments I realize I'm still capable of care, of attention, of love. It just looks different now. I don't chase after toddlers anymore, but I remember how. I don't juggle appointments and soccer practices and grocery lists like I used to, but I carry the stories of those years in my bones. I wear them like a second skin. We are made in part by what we've done, not because we're stuck in the past, but because the past has shaped the kindness in our hands, the gentleness in our gaze. I think of the meals I cooked, not the recipes, but the way the kitchen smelled when someone walked in, the warmth, the care, the unspoken message. You are safe here. I think of my partner, now gone, and how we used to dance in the living room when no one was watching. The radio crackled with old songs and we moved slowly. Two people who had built a life from scratch, one day at a time. Our love didn't shout, it hummed, and it stayed. Do you remember that kind of love? It stays with you, doesn't it? Even after the house is quieter, even after the lights are dimmed. The echoes of those days wrap around you, a reminder. You were someone's whole world once. Maybe you still are. And even now, I believe, we are not done offering love. We're just offering it in smaller doses, in softer ways. A word of encouragement, a gentle touch, a memory shared at the right moment, a story that helps someone younger understand that pain passes, that time softens what once seemed unbearable. That's not nothing, that's everything. Sometimes I look at my hands and marvel at what they've carried. Babies, groceries, grief, letters written by hand, wedding rings slipped on trembling fingers, soil turned for spring planting. These hands have shaped a life, and so have yours. So if today you find yourself wondering, what am I even here for now? Let me remind you, you are here because your presence still matters. You are here because the wisdom you carry cannot be Googled. You are here because someone, somewhere, is learning how to live by watching how you stay kind, how you endure, how you keep showing up with open hands. You were needed once, and you still are. Even if they don't say it out loud, even if they forget to call, even if the world seems to have moved on, you are still the keeper of stories. And stories shape the soul. It doesn't happen all at once. No one wakes up one day and announces, "We don't need you anymore." There's no memo, no warning, just the soft, steady drift, like a boat unmoored from a dock, slowly carried away by a tide you didn't notice rising. One day your phone rings less. One day you're not asked to pick someone up from the airport. One day the family vacation is planned without your input, not out of malice, just because. And it's strange, isn't it? How the same hands that once held so much responsibility now rest, idle. How you used to be the one people turned to for answers, and now you find yourself Googling things quietly, hoping not to ask for help too often. Have you ever caught yourself reaching for your phone to offer advice, only to stop because they haven't asked? I used to know everything about my children's lives, their friends, their frustrations, their favorite snacks. I knew their schedules better than my own. I anticipated their needs before they voiced them, but now I wait to be invited in. They're not unkind. They're busy. They're grown. They have jobs, partners, obligations, their own circles of chaos and calm. I understand it. I truly do. I remember what that phase of life feels like, how fast the days move, how exhausting it can be to simply get through a week. But still, I feel the ache of not being part of it. Sometimes I sit on the edge of the bed in the morning and wonder, what's expected of me today? And more often than not, the answer is nothing. There's no lunch to pack, no rides to give, no meetings to attend, no one waiting for me to arrive or asking when I'll be home. And while there is a certain peace in that, there is also a hollowness, a quiet space where purpose used to sit. I think many of us feel it, but few speak it, because to admit that we feel unnecessary, that takes courage. In a culture that worships usefulness, it feels almost shameful to say, no one needs me right now. But I'll say it out loud, because the truth deserves light, even when it's heavy. And if I'm being honest, the hardest part isn't being alone. It's being alone without being missed. It's walking into a room and realizing your absence wouldn't have changed anything. It's seeing a picture of a family gathering, one you weren't at, one you weren't even told about, and wondering, was it a mistake? Or did they think I wouldn't want to come? It's hearing, we didn't want to bother you, when all you wanted was to be bothered. There was a time when being needed was exhausting. Now I miss it like an old friend. But here's what I've come to understand. Their distance isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's just assumption. They assume we want rest. They assume we prefer silence. They assume we're slowing down and would rather not be involved. And sometimes we play into it. We say, no, it's okay when they offer. We wave them away with a smile and pretend we enjoy the quiet, even when it aches. Have you done that? Have you pretended the silence was chosen just to protect someone else from guilt? I have. And sometimes that's an act of love, but sometimes it's a surrender we didn't mean to make. So now I'm learning something new, something strange and unfamiliar. How to ask for inclusion, how to say, actually, I'd love to come, or I miss being part of things, or even just, can I help? Because I've realized something. People don't stop needing you. They just stop realizing they can. We teach them, over time, that we're okay being left out, that we don't want to be a burden, and eventually they believe us. But what if we retaught them? What if we reminded them, not with guilt or complaint, but with tenderness, that our hearts still want connection, our minds still long for meaning, our presence still carries quiet strength. I'm not asking to be worshipped. I don't want pity. I don't need a parade every time I show up. I just want to feel now and then like I still belong in the room. Like there's a place set for me, not out of habit, but out of love. Is that too much to hope for? I don't think so. I believe there's a way to re-enter our families, our communities, not as relics, not as ghosts of who we once were, but as elders, as keepers of grace, as people whose value does not depend on how fast we move, but on how deeply we see. Maybe we can show them what it looks like to grow older with openness. Maybe we can be honest about the loneliness without letting it define us. Maybe we can become teachers of presence simply by being here fully, because we are still here, and there's a quiet power in that. You see, aging doesn't strip us of value. It asks us to find it in new places, not in the doing, but in the being. Not in the applause, but in the stillness. Not in being needed, but in knowing that, even in the absence of demand, we still have something to give. Maybe the world has stopped asking, but that doesn't mean we've stopped offering. I remember sitting in my favorite chair one rainy afternoon. No plans, no phone calls, no one waiting for me to show up or check in. The silence at first felt comforting, but after a while it grew heavy. Not because I feared being alone, but because I feared being unnecessary. That word has haunted me more in these later years than I care to admit. Unnecessary. It slips in through the cracks of a quiet room, wraps itself around my shoulders and whispers, "You're not needed anymore. You've been retired, not just from work, but from relevance." But then I remember what I read, something the Stoics believed, and something I'm still learning to believe myself. You are not your usefulness. You are your character. Stoicism, in all its ancient wisdom, cuts through the noise of modern value systems. In a world that constantly tells us to prove our worth through performance, the Stoics offer something radically different. They tell us that our value lies not in what we can produce, but in who we are when everything else falls away. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who ruled armies and empires, often reminded himself that status, power, and even health are fleeting. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." It sounds harsh, perhaps, but it's not meant to frighten. It's meant to clarify. What remains when everything else is stripped away? Not your job, not your schedule, not even your physical strength. What remains is virtue, kindness, wisdom, courage, temperance, dignity. These are the things the Stoics called the only true good. And the most beautiful part, no one can take them from you. Not age, not illness, not forgetfulness, not time. I've spent most of my life tying my worth to how well I could serve others, and for a long time, that was deeply fulfilling. I found purpose in doing, for my family, for my work, for my community. I found pride in showing up strong, capable, and dependable. But now that those needs have faded or changed shape, I find myself asking, am I still whole, even when I am still? The Stoics would say yes. Not only whole, but finally free to focus on the most important part of life, the inner life. They believe that our job on this earth is not to be busy, but to be excellent in spirit, to live with integrity even when no one is watching, to be gracious even when the world is not paying attention, to endure discomfort without complaint, to offer love without demand, to stand still and not feel shame for it. Seneca, another Stoic thinker, once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." When I first read that, I thought about all the years I spent trying to prove I was valuable by staying busy. Now I'm learning how to stop proving and start simply being. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to sit in a room and do nothing, and still feel like you belong there? That's the modern sickness, I think. We've been taught that stillness is laziness, that quiet is useless, that slowing down is giving up. But it's not. Stillness is power too. Quietness is depth. Slowness is presence. You don't have to be needed to be worthy. You don't have to be seen to be sacred. You don't have to be useful to be loved. These truths are not easy to accept, especially after decades of equating love with service. But they are necessary truths, especially now. I've begun to practice something I call dignified stillness. It's the art of showing up in silence, in calm, in gentleness, and knowing that my presence still matters. Not because I'm doing anything in particular, but because I am grounded, alive, and inwardly at peace. Do you believe that about yourself? That your presence alone has value? If not, I invite you to sit with that question. It might take time to unlearn what the world has taught you about worth, but the Stoics knew this long before us. When you are no longer distracted by the chase, you begin to return to the truth. And the truth is, you were never a machine. You were never meant to be measured by your output. You were meant to live with grace, with wisdom, with heart. Your dignity is not in how fast you move, but in how well you love. Your dignity is not in how many people need you, but in how deeply you remain true to yourself when no one is looking. That is the inner citadel the Stoics spoke of, a kind of inner fortress that cannot be shaken by the winds of change. And now in these quieter years, we have the opportunity to strengthen it, to cultivate a life of meaning not based on usefulness, but on essence. So let the world rush around you. Let others stay busy, anxious, always chasing. You can rest, not in idleness, but in the still strength of a soul that knows it is worthy, not because of what it gives, but because of what it is. And that will never fade. Sometimes I wonder, when did speed become more valuable than presence? When did we begin to believe that the worth of a life could be measured in how much it gets done, how quickly, how visibly? I ask myself that a lot these days, watching people hurry through their lives, rushing from one meeting to another, one notification to the next. I see it in the eyes of my children, in the heavy breaths of my grandchildren, always catching up to something, or someone, or themselves. And in that whirlwind, those of us who move more slowly, we get left behind. Not intentionally, maybe, but inevitably. Have you felt that? Like you've become an extra in a story that used to revolve around you? Modern life is built on the altar of productivity. From the moment we're born, we're trained to measure our value by output, grades, paychecks, likes, followers, steps counted, hours worked. The currency of our time is efficiency, usefulness, hustle. So what happens when you retire? When your calendar no longer overflows? When no one expects anything from you at 7 a.m.? You fall out of the algorithm. You become, in the eyes of this system, unprofitable. And in a world that confuses profit with purpose, that's a dangerous thing to be. I've seen it everywhere. How we speak about elders as a burden on the system. How healthcare becomes a conversation of cost versus benefit. How the elderly are tucked away into corners, softened with euphemisms like rest homes or golden years, as if aging were a vacation we'd earned rather than a deeply human transformation we all move through. But let's not fool ourselves. This system wasn't built for aging. It was built for producing. And once you stop producing, it stops seeing you. That's the truth no one likes to say out loud. There was a time, long ago but not forgotten, when the elderly were seen as the heart of the village, the storytellers, the memory keepers, the wisdom bearers. You didn't become irrelevant as you aged. You became essential in a different way. But in our world now, where everything must be fast and new and monetizable, wisdom has no ticker price and quiet presence doesn't trend. So we vanish. We disappear into the background of society's bright and busy screen, and yet we are still here, watching, remembering, holding, being. I don't say all this to complain. I'm not bitter. I'm not angry. I'm simply observant. Like many of you, I've lived long enough to see the shift. I remember when people used to stop for each other, on porches, in grocery aisles, in waiting rooms. I remember when a long conversation wasn't considered inefficient, when writing a letter was normal, when asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but of neighborliness. And now, we have connection at our fingertips, but we're more isolated than ever. We have speed, but no time. We have productivity, but no peace. This is the trade we've made, and it's costing us something we don't even know how to name. What happens to a society that forgets how to honor stillness? That forgets how to slow down enough to look into older eyes and see mirrors, not museums? I'll tell you what happens. It loses part of its soul. Because a society that doesn't know how to value its elders is a society that doesn't know how to value its future either. It lives in the tyranny of now. And yet here we are, still breathing, still steady, still watching, like anchors beneath a surface current no one acknowledges. I believe we have a choice. Even in a world that no longer asks for our stories, we can still tell them. Even when we're no longer called upon, we can still show up, with dignity, with insight, with grace. We can become a quiet resistance, by refusing to rush, by refusing to measure ourselves by anyone else's metrics, by refusing to believe the lie that says our worth declines as our pace slows. You are not slow. You are deliberate. You are not outdated. You are distilled. And if this world has no place for your presence, then make one. Carve it gently with your gaze. Mark it softly with your listening. Claim it boldly by being still and unafraid in a culture that doesn't know how. I know this isn't easy. Some days I feel invisible. Some days I feel like the world is happening around me, not with me. Some days I wonder if I matter at all. But then I remember, a tree does not bloom year-round. And yet, even in its quietest season, it holds life. So do you. You are not what this world produces. You are what holds it together when the noise gets too loud. You are the deep breath the world doesn't know it needs. And while this culture races forward, you, just by being here, remind it how to stay human. Some mornings I wake before the sun, and the silence is so complete I can hear the rhythm of my own breathing. In those early hours, when the world has not yet asked anything of me, when no one expects a reply, a gesture, or a task, I feel something I rarely speak about, a quiet kind of certainty. It's not loud, it's not proud, it's not something the world would notice, but it's real. It's the certainty that I still matter. Not because of what I do, but because of who I am, beneath the roles, beneath the labels, beneath the expectations that have fallen away. Have you ever felt that kind of quiet strength? The kind that doesn't need to be announced or celebrated, just known? In our younger years, our value is often echoed back to us through the voices of others. Good job. We couldn't have done it without you. You're amazing. It's easy to feel worthy when your name is called often. But what about now? What about in these quieter chapters when the applause has faded and the spotlight has moved on? That's when the deeper truth must rise. Because if we've built our sense of self only on how others need us, what happens when their needs change? This, I believe, is the sacred work of aging, to remember who we are when no one is watching, to re-anchor ourselves not in activity, but in essence. And what I've discovered, what many of you may be discovering too, is that the flame of worthiness doesn't go out when life slows down. It simply burns lower, quieter, more steady. We are still the keepers of warmth, even when no one gathers around the fire. I think about the quiet ways we tend that flame, the gentle reminders we give to younger generations. Take your time. Be kind. You don't have to prove everything. We may not say much, but when we do, it comes from a place earned over decades. Not opinion, not ego, but lived experience. We are no longer loud with effort. We are deep with presence. And presence, dear friend, presence is a gift. We live in a time that forgets this, that values visibility over wisdom, volume over truth. But you and I, we know better. We've lived through enough cycles to know that everything loud eventually becomes quiet. Everything new becomes old. Everything strong eventually softens. And in that softening, something sacred begins. There's a kind of beauty in knowing that we don't have to hustle for our worth anymore. There's peace in choosing to sit by the window, drink tea slowly, and know that just this moment, this stillness, this breath is enough. We are not in a hurry anymore. We are not competing anymore. We are no longer trying to be seen. We are learning how to see the subtle changes in the light, to see the way our hands, now lined with time, still reach gently toward what matters, to see ourselves not as fading, but as deepening. Have you ever noticed how aged wood is more beautiful than new? How it carries a richness in tone, a memory in texture? That's what we are now. Not worn out, seasoned, not discarded, distilled, not obsolete, essential in ways that don't shout. So no, we may not be the ones building fires anymore, but we are the ones keeping them lit. Through our steady presence, through our silent prayers, through the way we listen patiently when others are too frantic to hear themselves think. That is not nothing. That is not just being. That is legacy work. And it matters. I often think of my grandmother. She rarely gave advice. She rarely interrupted. But when she looked at you, she saw you fully, quietly, without judgment. And in that gaze, I felt something I couldn't name back then, a transmission of worth, as if she were saying without words, "You are enough, right now, just like this." That's what I hope to offer now. Not solutions, not strategies, but presence. The kind of presence that says, even in stillness, you are significant. Even in silence, you are holding something precious. So if you're wondering today, do I matter even if no one says it? Let me offer this answer, not from philosophy or theory, but from my own bones. Yes, you do. You matter because you carry something no one else can. Your story, your memory, your hard-earned softness. You matter because the world still needs steady hearts in unsteady times. Not to lead the charge, but to light the way back. Back to slowness, back to kindness, back to presence. So keep tending your fire, even when no one notices, even when no one gathers around. Because somewhere, someone is finding their way in the dark, and it may just be your quiet flame that helps them see. There's a phrase I've caught myself saying more and more these days. Don't worry about me. It slips out so naturally, almost like a reflex. When my daughter forgets to call, "It's fine, don't worry about me." When my grandson misses a visit, "He's busy, don't worry about me." When someone offers help and I decline it too quickly, "Really, I'm okay, don't trouble yourself." And sometimes I wonder, am I saying it to comfort them or to protect myself from the pain of being overlooked? Because if I tell them not to worry, then I don't have to risk being disappointed. If I insist I'm fine, then I don't have to feel forgotten. It's safer, isn't it, to fold into the background with grace than to raise your hand and say, "I miss you. Have you done that too?" I don't blame them, not truly. My children are good people, kind, responsible, loving. They have their own storms to weather, their own lives to manage. I remember how exhausting it all was, juggling work and bills and children and aging parents. I remember the weight, but I also remember the warmth of knowing my parents were always there, like a lighthouse on the horizon, steady, predictable, comforting. And now somehow, I've become the lighthouse, always there, but no one looks for the light unless they're lost. There's a kind of ache that comes from loving people so much that you'd rather disappear than inconvenience them. It's the ache of choosing silence over need, of choosing solitude over vulnerability. But here's the truth I'm slowly learning, and maybe you are too. Love doesn't want invisibility. It wants presence. Not presence out of guilt or duty, but out of that quiet understanding that belonging isn't a favor. It's a need. Still, I find myself hesitating to call. I wait for the holidays. I wait for someone else to initiate. I convince myself that they'll reach out when they're ready, when they're less busy, when things settle down. But life rarely settles. It only rearranges itself around what we prioritize. And maybe, just maybe, I haven't been on that list lately. That doesn't make them bad. It just makes them human. And it makes this season of life more tender than I ever expected. The hardest part isn't being alone. It's wondering if anyone notices. It's realizing that you used to be the center of their orbit, and now you're more like a moon, present but distant, still glowing, but rarely the focus. And yet, I can't let that be the whole story. Because part of this too is me. I've withdrawn. I've said no when I meant yes. I've smiled when I wanted to cry. I've told them I'm fine when what I really wanted was someone to sit beside me and just be. Why? Because I was afraid. Afraid of seeming needy. Afraid of being a burden. Afraid of confirming the very lie I've spent years trying to unlearn. That if I can't offer something useful, then I'm not worth reaching for. But that's not what love is. Love doesn't need a reason. Love isn't earned by effort or erased by age. It simply is, like sunlight, like gravity, like breath. I don't want to be a ghost in my own family. I don't want to haunt the margins of their lives, smiling politely from the sidelines while they stumble through the years I once walked with them. I want to be in it, however I can. Maybe not leading the way anymore, but walking beside them, asking questions, listening, holding space, telling stories, being a soft place to land when the world gets too hard. That's not a burden. That's a blessing. And I think it's okay to say that out loud. It's okay to tell your children, I miss being close. It's okay to ask your grandchild, will you tell me what's been on your heart lately? It's okay to say, I'd love to come. Thank you for inviting me. It's okay to need someone. Even now, especially now. Because connection doesn't expire, it deepens. And the beauty of family isn't just in what we give, but in what we allow ourselves to receive. So I'm learning slowly to reach back out, to call without apology, to ask without shame, to hope without fear. Because I still have love to offer, and I still need love in return. And somewhere in the middle of all that giving and receiving is something sacred, belonging. The kind that doesn't need to be explained or justified. The kind that says, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be productive. You just have to be here. So no, I'm not here to guilt anyone. I'm here to remind you and myself that relationships don't drift apart all at once. They stretch, they loosen, they fade softly, like threads unraveling, but they can also be rewoven. One honest moment at a time, one phone call, one visit, one simple, vulnerable sentence. I'd love to hear your voice more often. And maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for us to say it. Maybe they've mistaken our silence for strength. Maybe they think we don't want to be included anymore. Maybe they're afraid to bother us, the way we're afraid to bother them. So let's meet in the middle. Let's let go of pride and pick up presence. Let's trade distance for closeness, not through demand, but through invitation. Because beneath all the noise of life, love is still listening. Let's give it something worth hearing. There's a question I've carried with me quietly for some time now. What if I am no longer helpful to anyone? Am I still worthy of love? It's not something I say out loud at dinner tables or over the phone. It's the kind of question that lives in the softest corners of the heart, where old beliefs curl up and whisper stories shaped by years of proving, pleasing, and performing. We grew up believing that love had to be earned. Be good and they'll praise you. Work hard and they'll respect you. Be useful and they'll need you. And so we did. For decades we gave. We showed up. We held the pieces of other people's lives together without asking for much in return. Not because we expected anything, but because it felt right. It felt like love. But now, as the rhythms of life slow and the requests grow fewer and the silence stretches longer, I find myself asking, was that love conditional? Was it tied to what I could offer? And if so, who am I now? Have you asked yourself that too? What does love look like when there's nothing left to earn? What does it mean to be loved when you don't bring home a paycheck, when you no longer solve problems, when your hands shake and your body forgets what it once knew? The Stoics had a word for something unshakable, untouchable by the world. Eudaimonia, a kind of deep flourishing that comes not from what happens to you, but from how rooted you are in your own truth. And the truth is this: you are lovable because you exist, because you breathe, because you are human, not because you perform or provide or prove. You don't have to do anything extraordinary to deserve tenderness. You don't have to justify your presence at the table. You don't need a reason to be wrapped in someone's arms or to be remembered in someone's thoughts. Love, at its purest, has no spreadsheet. It keeps no record of what was given and what was returned. It doesn't wait for you to be useful. It simply shows up and stays. I think of a baby held in its mother's arms, fragile, dependent, offering nothing but its presence, and yet utterly beloved. No one questions whether that child deserves love. So why now do we question it for ourselves? At what point did we internalize the lie that age makes us less worthy of affection? If anything, our years make love more profound, because now we love not through performance, but through presence, through listening, through remembering, through sitting beside someone without needing to fix them. There is a kind of love that only the older heart can offer. A love that has survived disappointment. A love that knows how to wait. A love that understands that real connection is not grand, it is consistent. And just as importantly, there is a kind of love that the older heart still needs. We never grow out of that. We never become too wise to need a hand on our shoulder, a call just to say hi, a soft voice at the end of the day that says, "I see you, I'm glad you're still here." We may not say it often, but that need doesn't vanish. It simply becomes quieter. Like everything else in this stage of life, it deepens, softens, and settles in the places no one else can see. But you can feel it, can't you? That small ache behind the ribs that says, I want to be loved just as I am. Not for who I was, not for what I used to do, but for who I am now, in this slower, gentler version of me. That desire is not weakness. It is proof you are still alive. And it is not selfish to long for love. It is human. Sometimes I catch myself brushing away compliments. You're so patient. Oh, I'm just old, that's all, I'll laugh. You're so wise. I've just made more mistakes than most. We diminish ourselves before anyone else gets a chance. Why? Because we've been taught to be humble, but often we confuse humility with invisibility. But what if we allowed love in, without deflection? What if we stopped explaining why we're still here and simply received the gift of being cherished? What if we looked in the mirror, not to mourn what has changed, but to honor what remains? You don't need to offer anything new. You don't need to earn back your place in the world. You already have it, right now, as you are. Even if your voice trembles, even if you forget things, even if you don't move as quickly, or remember names, or carry groceries like you used to, you are still someone's comfort. You are still someone's memory. You are still someone's prayer. You are still lovable. Not someday, not if you try harder, not if you stay strong. Now, even in your stillness, especially in your stillness. So let us stop asking whether we deserve love. Let us stop apologizing for being. Let us stop waiting to be useful before we believe we matter. Let us instead whisper to ourselves every morning if we must, I am loved, without condition, without reason, simply because I am. And let that truth sink in, deeper than the voices of the past, louder than the silence of the phone that didn't ring, warmer than the absence we sometimes mistake for rejection. You are not a burden. You are beloved, even now, especially now. Tonight, as I sit by the window and listen to the wind whisper through the trees, I feel something I haven't felt in a long while. Not excitement, not accomplishment, not even certainty, just peace. The kind that doesn't arrive with answers, but with presence. The kind that doesn't solve anything, but settles everything. And maybe after all these words, all these reflections, all these tender questions, maybe this is where I was always meant to arrive. Right here, in the stillness, with you. Because in the end, I think that's what we all want. To know that even after the roles change, even after the noise fades, even after the spotlight has moved on, we are still here, still breathing, still watching, still becoming. And maybe that's the quiet miracle no one talks about, that we endure, that we adapt, that we carry on, not with loud declarations or grand performances, but with small rituals of presence. The tea we make in the morning, the way we straighten the photos on the shelf, the care with which we fold a blanket, the memory we carry when no one else remembers. We stay, and that staying is sacred. You may feel forgotten. You may feel unseen. You may even some days wonder what the point of it all is. But let me remind you, gently, truthfully, as someone who has felt the same, you being here is everything. Not because you're needed, not because you're useful, not because you've done something remarkable today, but because your life, in and of itself, is a quiet defiance of a world that moves too fast to notice what matters. Because your presence is a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught, only lived. And because somewhere, someone is watching you simply be, and learning that it's okay to slow down, that it's okay to rest, that it's okay to grow old with grace. You may not see the ripple you create, but it's there, in the way someone speaks more gently because you taught them how, in the way a child pauses to listen because they saw you do the same, in the way your silence has more depth than all the shouting in the world. We are not burdens. We are not leftovers. We are not afterthoughts. We are the soul of this world, the part that remembers, that forgives, that holds steady when everything else shakes. And if you've doubted that lately, that's okay. If you felt small or invisible or unimportant, that's okay too. You are still learning, still unfolding, still discovering what it means to be here, in this skin, at this age, with this much life behind you, and still somehow so much life within you. So let me say this clearly, in case no one else has said it lately. Thank you for staying, for softening instead of hardening, for listening when others stopped speaking, for offering grace where others withdrew, for being here, still, because being here is enough, not being productive, not being useful, not being impressive, just being. And if you hear nothing else from me, hear this. You are not a burden. You are a blessing. Not the loud kind, not the obvious kind, but the kind that lingers in the air long after the conversation ends. The kind that steadies someone's breath. The kind that keeps the world a little more human. So go gently tonight, not with regret, but with reverence. Not with loneliness, but with recognition. You are still here. Thank you for staying with me through the pauses, the reflections, the quiet truths that sometimes take a little time to settle in the heart. In a world where attention is fleeting and everything moves quickly, your choice to sit with these words, to allow them to unfold gently alongside your own thoughts, means more than I can say. Perhaps something in these stories echoed something in yours. Perhaps a line stirred a memory. Perhaps, just for a moment, you felt less alone. That is all I ever hoped for. Not to teach, not to preach, but simply to be with you, to walk beside you for a little while, to remind you and myself that even in our quietest seasons, we are not forgotten. That even in our gentlest forms, we still carry strength. That even now, we are still enough. So thank you for showing up, for listening, for being the kind of person who honors depth, not noise, presence, not performance, and above all, humanity in its most tender form. Wherever you are right now, in your kitchen, your garden, your favorite chair by the window, may you feel, even in this very moment, the quiet warmth of being seen. You are still here, and I'm so deeply grateful for that. Until next time, take good care of your beautiful, irreplaceable self.